if you guys want early access and exclusive access to content, please consider becoming a channel member or joining my Patreon. Hi, my name is Will, I host the Board Book Geek. So I've had time to collect my thoughts on The Rings of Power, Season 2, and what I've seen of it the first 3 episodes. So I thought I would write something. This is very spoiler-free, by the way, and intentionally I'm keeping that way. A more reasoned take on what I'm finding. So, let's talk about it. The first 3 episodes of Amazon's Rings of Power, Season 2, are quite frankly a letdown. Despite the massive budget and high expectations, the series continues to struggle with the same issues that plagued its first season, from inconsistent writing to uninspired character arcs. These episodes failed to deliver on the promise of a gripping fantasy set within the world of Tolkien and Middle-earth. The pacing remains a significant problem, dragging through scenes after scene of dull exploratory dialogue and repetitive dialogue. There is a massive difference between showing and telling in narrative, especially on screen. Info dumping is not how to write a story. The writers seem more interested in world building for the sake of spectacle than telling a compelling story. There are moments that try to capture the grandeur of Middle-earth, but they feel forced and flat. And honestly, they lack the emotional weight needed to make them memorable. The writing, in particular, feels uninspired and often downright clumsy. The dialogue swings between overly dramatic and painfully bland. The characters' line delivery feels like they were lifted from a second-rate fantasy novel, and there is a lack of nuance or subtext to the script, and the handful of attempts at humour or gravitas mostly fall flat. It's hard to feel invested in a story when the conversations feel so artificial and convoluted. To make matters worse, the acting does little to elevate the weak writing. Many of the performances come off wooden and unconvincing, where actors are often overreacting in a misguided attempt to add intensity or underplaying the role to the point of dullness. Emotional moments lack impact because the actors seem disconnected from the material, as if themselves are unsure of the direction or motivation behind the characters' actions. And the lack of chemistry between the cast members only adds to the show's overall disjointedness and inconsistencies. Character development is another weak point. Many of the characters feel like cardboard cutouts, with little depth or motivation. The show introduces new faces, but they are bland and forgettable, and this was a common problem across every episode so far, failing to add any real intrigue or complexity to the narrative. Even with the returning characters seem stuck in limbo. The arcs of these first 3 episodes were either stagnant or nonsensical. It's frustrating to watch characters make decisions that feel more like a plot device than an organic development. And visually, the show is impressive in places, but the overall aesthetic, married by somewhat inconsistent CGI here and there. And I will say, there are some beautiful moments visually in this show, but the awkward staging, it never quite fits together. Certain scenes look like they belong in a completely different show, creating a disjointed viewing experience. The action sequences, which should be a highlight, are surprisingly dull and lack a lot of intensity needed to engage viewers. Ultimately, the first 3 episodes of Rings of Power Season 2 feel like a missed opportunity despite all the hype and resources behind it. The series fails to capture the magic of Tolkien's world, leaving us with a shallow and uninspired fantasy that doesn't live up to its potential. Unless there are dramatic improvements in the episodes to come, The Rings of Power risks being forgotten as just another mediocre attempt at capitalizing on a beloved franchise. And that's how I feel about this show. That's all opinions are completely subjective, but I came out of the viewing experience and it just felt kind of empty. It was awful in places, and basic minor continuity errors did not help matters in how the story is told. Ultimately, Rings of Power serves as a reminder that you can't just put a name on something and expect it to sell. You have to create something, and it has to stand on its own. A writing team that obviously have a disdain for Tolkien, and bringing in Simon Tolkien, who is a failed crime writer with a lot of bitterness, and I'm sure of it, even though they're trying to save face right now. It often feels like the show exists purely to try to capitalize and make money out of something that should be the standing point of fantasy. When other shows, such as The House of the Dragon, are far better conceived, far better written, and far more impressive, and feel far deeper, there's a problem. For all the glitz and glamour and shiny special effects, Rings of Power, these 3 episodes felt dull and lifeless. They felt like they were trying too hard to be something that they're not. They were trying to be epic and imaginative and deep, but the writing did not convey that. The performances didn't convey that. And as I said in the previous video, the way the show has no sense of time is also a major problem when it comes to storytelling. I personally don't like changes to Tolkien's work, but changes are acceptable when telling a story in a different medium. The problem is, they've just smushed everything together. And that's a problem. The fast travel vibe from teleporting in a video game from one location to another that you've already visited, like giving HMO to fly to a flying type Pokemon in the original games. You could just fly to the places you've already been. The narrative is strange, and the fact that the no sense of time thing as a writer is bugging the hell out of me really tells me what the show is like. Everything feels rushed and everything ends on a cliffhanger, a duff moment that feels more soap opera-y. I always say this about Rings of Power, it was meant to be this epic big thing, and I didn't believe the leaks when it came out. I was very happy to hear that Amazon had the rights and a massive budget to create something beautiful, but instead they've created something that is Tumblr bait, rather than an actual convincing TV show. Bland and lifeless and badly written fan fiction that makes my immortal look like Shakespeare. Derivative writing is also something else that stands out. For me, as a viewer, hearing those lines that are lifted from the Tolkien books and the Peter Jackson movies, that this is nothing related to them, really. It's kind of disheartening, even trying to replicate scenes, story beats, and nuance, and that's a common feel over the entire series. They tried to replicate the Fellowship of the Ring, and I have a feeling, if the leaks are true, they're going down the Two Towers, the Return of the King. So who knows what will happen. Ultimately, if you like the show, good for you, but if you don't like it, good for you too. I don't like it. But, and I get in trouble for reviewing things I don't like, I will say, I wanted to be proven wrong with Lord of the Rings and the Rings of Power. I wanted to be proven wrong. And the only character two characters I actually like in the entire show is the Dwarven Princess and her husband. Quite literally, the only 2 people in the entire Season 1 and Season 2, and this mind-boggling mess that I actually like. I'd quite happily watch a show about those 2. I imagine it being quite wholesome and sweet, because they are genuinely a hoot, and the chemistry between those 2 actors is very good. But, as we sit here, pondering what's going to happen when its viewership numbers come out and more information drops, well, who knows? If the leaks are true, this is going to be a very weird series. So, tell me what you think in the comments below. I will talk to you guys later and have a wonderful day.